This video was brought to you by Titan Comic Pressing. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Titan Comic Pressing LLC.
Welcome to the second episode of Back Issues. Where did all these extra pixels come from? So yeah, sorry about the poor quality of the last video. Turns out the software which I had used to record lectures back in my teaching days wasn't great for capturing video. It was only really meant for screen caps, so the quality was really bad. But I found some better software, so hopefully we're looking better now. Any road, in this episode, I want to talk about the different types of comic collecting and how it is important for everyone to determine what kind of collectors they are with respect to their buying strategy. We all have different budgets for how much we can spend on comics, and not all types of collecting are financially equal. By the end of this video, I'll have proposed a way of how to determine how you can divide up whatever your budget is on different types of comic purchases. So first, let's quickly cover what I consider to be the 7 types of comic collecting. So number one, I would say the bound collector. This is the person that really purchases bound comics, being trades or graphic novels. So here we have a trade, a collection of individual issues, or graphic novels. They really stick to that. It's easy to purchase them when they eventually come out. It's not as hard to find copies because these will be reprinted very often. So it's a little bit easier to get a hold of these and get through the stories. The second type of collector I will call the digger. That is those that like to dive deep into dollar boxes and find a good value on great stories on the cheap. So you can go to comic book stores or conventions and usually find places that have just boxes and boxes of comics that are cheap, unorganized. You got to search through to find something fun. For example, I found this in a dollar. Actually, I ended up finding the full run of this series. As you can see, it's not in the best condition. We have some drawing and stuff like that. But the story is great. The quality's not awesome. It's not a valuable book, but I got a good story for a good value. The third type, I would say, is the modern collector. That is those that are reading current issues off the shelf. They're showing up to their comic shop every week or so to buy individual issues off the shelf. Usually they have a pull file, so when they go to the comic shop, they just have what they want set aside for them. So getting individual issues just as they come out currently. The fourth type of collector, I would say, is the variant collector. That is the type of collector that really, really enjoys variant covers. So a lot of current issues that come out will come out with one or more variant covers. These are usually lighter in quantity. Some are very light in quantity and therefore end up costing a lot, and their value may go up over time due to their scarcity. Personally, I'm not a big variant collector, so I had a hard time finding a real valuable, interesting variant out of my collection. But this is a variant cover. And variant covers can range from just being the same cover price as others, and if they're more scarce, your local comic stores might up the price a little bit. But there are some people that really are into getting those variant covers. Number 5, I would say, I would call the classic story collector. That is those that just really like old stories and will dig through old issues to find some older stories just to read because they like them. It's a little bit different than the digger. These are usually found in back issue stock of comic stores. And might cost a little bit more to get those stories or those runs of. But maybe you heard about an interesting story that came out years ago, maybe before your time, or you just missed it. So you go back and find those books because you just really want that story and want to own the issues that contain that story. I've been on a symbiote kick a Venom kick because of Absolute Carnage lately, so I've been going back and getting a lot of the old Venom stories. Number 6 is the key issue collector. These are the people that love owning comics where important events, either in comic book history or in the stories, take place, or even just in the medium in general. The first Bronze Age book, the first appearance of something or someone, or just an important event. They just like to own those, what are called key issues. And this overlaps a little bit with investor. So investors are those that are really only in it for, or that type of collecting is specifically for monetary investment, with the purpose of reselling the books either quickly for a quick profit or holding on to them hoping that the value goes up with the intent to sell them later. These you can see in different forms. Again, there's usually overlap. The investor usually focuses on key issues and sometimes variants. So things that they expect to go up in price. So it could be loose books that are key issues. I have an example here of a key issue. This is the first Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, including a couple of first appearances of characters. And this is where you start to see between variant collectors, key issue collectors, and investors, you start to see some slab stuff. That is stuff that is graded by some sort of company, things like CGC, CBCS, where it's given an official grade to help certify the value of that book. So I see these last two examples kind of overlap with both the key issue collector and the investor. Now, each of these types don't live in a bubble. In fact, I believe they can be divided into two major categories: hobby and financial. And some of these collector types live in both worlds. It's a little bit of hobby, a little bit of financial. And also some of these types kind of flow into each other. That is, if you're one type of collector, you are collector adjacent to other types. And making the transition from something that you are a collector of into another can be very typical.
I put together this chart to show where the collector types fall into the hobby and financial categories, how they are adjacent to each other, and their relative cost. These costs are very loose and meant to only be general in relationship to each other. Of course, the actual dollar amount spent can differ drastically. It is also important to understand that you do not have to be just one kind of collector. You can have interests in any number of these types, and as we'll see, identifying where your interests are is extremely important to your comic budget. We can see the two major categories, hobby and financial, with the bound and digger collectors falling in hobby. This type of collecting is mainly in it for the great stories and doesn't expect what they buy to increase in value. On the other hand, the investor is strictly in financial. These are comics that are obtained with the sole purpose of making a profit. In between is modern, classic story, variant, and key issue collectors. Modern and classic story collectors are towards the top, as their main interest is in the stories. However, it is possible that what they get in these pursuits may increase in financial value. Variant and key issue collectors also mainly do it for hobby, but those items are more likely to rise in value, so they are closer to the financial side. The yellow arrows indicate collection type adjacency. These are relationships that I feel are easy to make. For example, it may be common for a bound collector to get tired of waiting 6 months for part of the story, so they may start buying individual issues, becoming a modern collector. A modern collector may read a current story with a character they really enjoy, and may entertain the thought of getting the first appearance of that character, leading them into the realm of key issue collector. I'm not going to go into all the relationships, and this isn't to say that there aren't others. A digger may suddenly find an opportunity to become an investor. What I have here are simply what I think are the strongest relationships. Next, let's use this to determine your comic strategy. First, you need to determine what your collector types are. Bound collector, digger, modern collector, variant collector, classic story collector, key issue collector, or investor. We'll go through this using myself as an example. I identify with the following 4 collector types. Bound collector, some series I prefer in trade and also enjoy graphic novels. Modern collector, because I have a pull file which I use to buy issues as they are released. Classic story collector, because I will hunt down old stories in issue form. And key issue collector, as I enjoy owning important and valuable comics. Second is to weigh the importance of each type. On a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is the highest, give a value for each type. This is not a ranking. The same value can be given for multiple types. How much enjoyment, relatively speaking, does each of these types give you? I've given my collector types the following values based on how much enjoyment I get from each. 2 from bound collector, 4 for modern collector, 3 for classic story collector, and 5 for key issue collector. Third, multiply the value you gave each collector type by the relative cost of each, and add up the results. The relative cost of each type can be seen here. 2 for bound collector, 1 for digger, 3 for modern collector, 4 for variant collector and classic story collector, and 5 for key issue collector and investor. Here, I've done this for my collector types and come up with a total value of 53. Don't throw away those other values yet. You'll need them for the last step. Lastly, calculate the percentage of each of your collector types based upon the weight and cost of each. For each of your collector costs times importance value, divide by the total from the previous step. This will be roughly how you should divide up your comic budget between different types of purchases. And finally, I've done this for my values, resulting in 7.5% for bound collections, 22.6% for both modern collections and classic story collections, and 47% for key issue collections, which, due to rounding, adds up to be just shy of 100% of my comic budget. And maybe I'll use that last 0.3% to invest in something less fun, like stocks.
So that is it. My breakdown of different types of comic collectors, and hopefully a little strategy for you in your financial responsibilities towards how you want to divide up your finances when it comes to your type and your styles of comic collecting. So that's it for now. I will see you next time.